Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. A little bit of motorcycle driving by action to start this video off. Great. Well, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus lately. Haven't seen you guys in about 2 weeks. Been sourcing a bunch of parts. I had a couple shipping issues and we've got it all sorted out. So today we are here to start the 2G DSM Garrett to MHI turbocharger swap. So the engine's nice and cooled down, and I'm going to show you over here. It took quite a bit of part sourcing, but we got our big 16G with a couple of parts put underneath. Our oil feed line finally showed up. That was one of the issues I had here trying to source those items. We got a couple of them off of eBay that ended up being incorrect. I could bore you with the details for hours, but they're here now. So today we're going to start ripping this thing apart. We're going to pop the radiator out. I'm sure you guys know Jaffro Mobile. That guy says take the radiator out, gives you a good adequate amount of room. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to drain the coolant, we're going to drain the oil, we're going to disconnect everything, and we're not going to reuse the factory oil feed location from the oil filter housing. We're actually going to run it from up here, right off the side of the head. I got the oil line that feeds from the head, so this should be an interesting time. Let's get jumping into this thing, guys. First step we're going to do is get the car jacked up in the air and start draining the fluids. Let's do it. Alright guys, so we got the jack, our pan to collect our coolant. PB blastered the ever-loving hell out of all the bolts and fasteners on this exhaust. We've got to take off the lower downpipe section. We've got to disconnect the O2 housing. We've got to take the 4 bolts off the top of the exhaust manifold. And behind that, we're going to disconnect our water lines on top of the turbo. We're going to take off our stock oil feed line connection and the banjo bolts holding the water lines on. And we're going to get this radiator ripped out of here first off. So I'm going to jack the front end up, pop open the drain on the bottom of the radiator, and disconnect our plug right here and our other plug, which I tucked away right over here by the MAF translator, and take out our couple of 10mm bolts that are down in the bottom of the radiator holding the hard lines on. And we're going to disconnect our upper and lower radiator hose once it's drained out. So I'm going to throw you guys off to the side and get cracking on this thing. Alright guys, so if you've seen the radiator fan install video, you know that on the driver's side bottom section of your radiator there is a little pepcock, a little stopcock. You can open that thing up and start draining your coolant out. When you pop your radiator cap off, it'll start flowing out, and like we did last time, we're going to reuse the coolant. So I'm going to throw you guys over here and get all this stuff disconnected. It should be fun. So we've got all the radiator and fans and the coolant overflow system pulled out. I left the O2 sensor plugged in. I didn't get to that quite yet, but we're going to do a little cleaning. The thermostat housing has a bunch of crap on it, so I'm going to brush that off with a brass wire brush. Next, we're going to come down here and we're going to disconnect the 2 bolts that are on the downpipe. And we're going to get those out of the way first. Then up top here, if you notice, I have 2 different size bolts, 2 in the back and 2 in the front. The front ones are 14mm and the back are 17mm. So once we get this downpipe cracked off of here, we are going to disconnect the O2 housing plug. Then we're going to start working on taking these bolts out of the exhaust manifold and dropping our turbo down. Almost there. so I got the 2 downpipe bolts disconnected from the O2 housing. We unplugged our O2 sensor. We disconnected our vacuum and boost source lines running from the wastegate and the side of the compressor housing. Next, I'm going to crack free all the rest of my bolts. I'm going to crack free the top 4 on the exhaust manifold. I'm going to try to get to the couple on the O2 housing, the 3 out of the 4 I believe. One of them's a stud. And see if I can get some of the water lines disconnected, like the front banjo bolt and the 7/16 oil line on top. So I'm going to go for that real fast. Alright, so we've got our manifold bolts pulled out. I left one back in here on the stud just to make sure that the turbo didn't drop, and started to take out the front banjo bolt for the water line. I got that right here in my hand, and one thing I realized is I did not buy new copper crush washers, so I'm going to run to the store and grab those real fast. Well, the rest of this thing drains out, and definitely keep a pan underneath when you're taking these water lines out. The water pipe is still filled with coolant. You wouldn't believe how much just poured out of this thing. I thought draining the radiator would be the low point, but if you look, that thing's still going full bore. So we're gonna run to the store real fast and be right back, guys. So now that I've picked up the crush washers, I've got this front banjo bolt disconnected here, and what I'm going to do next is disconnect the water line clamps on the soft lines over here and right here. I'm going to try to get this last bolt pulled out on the side of the O2 housing, and hopefully we can rock this turbo down, get it out. The only other thing I have to do is, since we're not reusing this oil feed line, we're going to snip it right here, and I'm also going to have to drain the oil before I get too much further into this so that it doesn't make a huge mess. I think I'm going to end up throwing away the rest of this antifreeze. It's got a bunch of crap in it, and a bunch of rust fell into it when I was disconnecting my downpipe bolts. So I don't want to filter it and save it. I've got 2 fresh gallons sitting over here on the side, which I'm going to use. So I'm going to throw you guys off to the side and get cracking on this, and hopefully we can get this thing out in the next couple of minutes. So since we're not reusing our oil feed line, I snipped that off right there so I can get to the 7/16 bolt on the turbocharger later. I disconnected the bracket where the oil line bolts to the side of the turbo compressor housing. We've gotten all the soft lines out of the way. I've cracked free the majority of the O2 housing bolts that I can get to. The downpipe has also got the bolts pulled out of it. The last thing that I got to do to free this bad boy up is going to be disconnecting the 2 10mm bolts that are against the side of the oil pan. And we're going to try to rock this bad boy out of here. So I'm going to get on that right now. So after a little bit of battling with the downpipe, here we have our T-25 and our brand new big 16G. So what we're going to end up doing here is reusing our water line right here on the back. We might be able to use this drain, but I have a second oil drain line. This is our head oil feed line right here. We're going to be connecting instead of the stock T-25 oil filter housing set up there. We're going to get rid of that whole line and put this, where is it? Right in here. There's a 3/8 BSPT plug that we're going to put into the filter housing after we remove the line. And some of the differences here, the 7cm housing is nice and smooth on the inside. And if you look at the stock housing, there's a step, and that's what this donut gasket sits in when we connect it to the manifold. So we're obviously not going to use that, and we're going to throw our gaskets in. I have to remove that stud right there still and get the rest of the O2 housing pulled off. And once that's done, we can start putting the 16G together. So let's get after it, folks. Alright guys, so as you can see, we've pulled both of the turbochargers out here. We got the T-25 there and our new 16 sitting here. I just finished bolting on, well, unbolting the O2 housing from the T-25 and rebolting it to the 16G. Definitely grab yourself a couple of nuts so you can back out the studs. I tried tapping on mine with a hammer and then grabbing them in the center of the section where it wasn't threaded and unscrewing them. The only one that came out was this one right here. The short ones that bolt up to the O2 housing, they're bare. So the next thing, before we get this bad boy thrown back into the car, we have to come over here and we have to get rid of the rest of this old oil feed hard line, go down to the oil filter housing and put in our plug. Then we're going to pull the oil filter itself. We're going to drain the rest of the oil out of the pan. I'm kind of doing that a little bit backwards than what anybody else would do. Then we're going to mock up our water lines, hold it up in here and see if we can get everything connected. I have a couple of different options here. So looks like that's the feed line and that's the return line. And all we need to do is have our new oil line from the head hook up and our new oil drain line. And something I wanted to mention now before anybody says anything about it, you're going to see me reusing some exhaust gaskets, and that's just going to be the way it's going to be for right now. I do have a brand new exhaust system that I'm going to be putting on here shortly, but that's another video. So we're going to get this stuff all cleaned off. I'm going to pick up some of these tools real quick, and we're going to start working on taking out this line right here. Alright, so now we are going to go underneath the car here and try to get this oil drain plug pulled out. Once we get that done, we're going to move on to this oil filter housing. So I'm going to do this real fast. Alright, so we got the oil drain down below here. Looks like it's getting pretty close to being finished. Alright, now we are going to come over here and we're going to take our oil filter right out. And then I'm going to grab our happy little torch off to the side and see if we can start working on the oil feed line. Let's get it. It's pitch black out here. I'm calling it quits for the night, but I did get right here. That is actually the factory oil feed fitting off of the oil filter housing, which I did manage to get out, which I can show you real fast. If you take a look right up here, that is a brand new 3/8 BSPT fitting, and that's blocking off the oil from coming out of the old port. So now all we got to do is go up and put everything back together, get our water hoses, our new oil feed from the head, turbo put back together and on, we'll be done. So I'll see you tomorrow. Hey guys, we're back at it. Ran out of daylight yesterday and we're about halfway through this 16G install. So it looks like where we left off, we got the hard line removed, we got the plug put in, the oil filter housing. So now it looks like we're just gonna have to start mocking up our parts, make sure that our water lines fit to the factory location over here, get the oil feed line tightened down, all the studs put in the turbine housing, and get ready to put this stuff back together. So I'm gonna stick you guys out to the side, do a little bit of fitment work, mess around with some things here, and I'll notify you if I come up with any issues, which I'm sure there's definitely going to be issues. There's never not issues. But so far, everything's looking all right. So I'm going to get all this stuff back out and get cracking. Alright guys, so during the process of installing the water lines, I've reused both of my factory lines here, and as you can see, this is the rear line. You want to make it something like this. I got a nice bend on it with a blowtorch and these angled needle nose pliers so I could grab a little piece of the end, and I just heated the center section of it up and lightly grasped the other end with some vice grips, and I got it to twist. It was sticking like way up here. I got it to twist down. Now it's out of the compressor housing enough so I can bolt that up. I did the same thing to the other water line that goes on the front. The one on the front, you have to tweak it. Actually, I don't think it's hot anymore, but if you'll notice, if you look straight down at it, it's bent backwards now. It was twisted inward like this, so the angle on the back didn't quite fit, but now this will fit on the back side and go to the water, I think it's a water return line. Regardless, everything should match up nicely now with the factory system. So I'm going to go ahead and make some paper gaskets real fast, get all these oil drain line and the oil pan gasket figured out, and I also have to do the one for my J-pipe real fast. So I'm going to go ahead and stencil those out, cut those out, bolt these up with some banjo bolts, get my oil line feed nice and tight, and we're going to start putting this thing back together. Alright guys, so I didn't film it, but I did manage to get the 16G mounted to the O2 housing and all that fun. I've got all of my coolant lines run back here. I just took the stock line and I snipped a little bit off after I heated it up with a torch and bent it straight where I needed it to be. And this lower line here, this one's weird. It goes around and it actually pokes out right there. And I found between this gap here from this line to there, if you take the stock line, which is connected like this, and you flip it, it actually reaches perfectly fine back there. So I'll still be able to get it on to both of the coolant hoses, or coolant fittings rather. I'm going to hook that up in just a second. And then all I have to do is put my oil drain line on, check all my connections, and start putting the exhaust back on, and we're almost home free. I made a few gaskets out of some cardboard. I'm going to cover them with RTV real fast and let them set up and dry. We've got a lot of stuff bolted on and ready to go. I'm going to come back here in about a half an hour and get the rest of this finished out and hopefully get to record some of it. So I'll see you guys shortly. Got the gaskets covered up with some RTV. They're all ready to go. I'm going to crawl underneath and connect the oil return line, and I'm going to hook up an oil filter. I'm going to double check my plug that I put into the oil filter housing from the stock line and start putting everything back together here. So I'm going to put you guys on the side right about here, and we're going to get putting this thing back together as fast as possible. So I've been doing this stuff kind of off camera today. It's kind of a pain in the butt to throw this thing off to the side and try to run back out. A lot of work under the car, so I apologize. The next video will definitely have a lot more camera time. What we've done so far is we've attached our new oil filter, double checked our plug, we've connected the downpipe with the gasket, the manifold to the turbo. Our J-pipe has a gasket on it, and it's also bolted down. I'm now messing around with some intercooler pipe. I'm going to try to run it to the stock side mount for the short term until we do our front mount. I have some extra pieces over here on the ground. We've also hooked up our oil drain on the bottom of the turbo and connected that to the oil pan. Now the only couple of things we have left to do are we've also attached our head oil feed line. We just have to finish this run of intercooler piping, put the coolant reservoir back in, the radiator back in, connect the O2 sensor, and put all of our little nuts and bolts and zip ties back together here. So we're in the home stretch. So had to take a quick break and run downtown again. Gotta love that. But anyway, looks like almost everything is finished here. We're hooked up with our new intercooler piping. Looks like the intake has to go on. The radiator's got to go in. But right now, I think it's time to put some oil in this pig. So I'm going to get that on. Then I'm going to throw the radiator back in here and get that bolted all back together. And start filling all these fluids up and putting all these parts back where they need to be. So let's get it in. Got everything reconnected. We've got our radiator in. All the lines are run away from the exhaust as best I can get them. This one I might have to sneak back here a little bit. The fan harness there. It's filled up with oil. I've checked underneath. There's nothing leaking right yet, so I think it's time to give it a fire up and see how this new 16G sounds. Hopefully it does not explode. But first we have to come over here and we have to pull the 20A fuse for motor. Because we're gonna crank this thing over a couple of times without it running, just to get the oil flowing into this turbo. So I'm gonna do that real fast. Alright guys, so the engine is running. The battery was actually flat dead because I left my hatch open and my doors open for 2 straight days. But that's besides the point. I came over, I turned the boost controller all the way down. We're gonna see where she lands. We're gonna take her out for a maiden voyage, and yeah, everything looks good so far. No leaks, no weird noises. Obviously it's a little loud because I have a ton of beautiful holes in my exhaust. But first things first, I'm gonna pull some of these tools out of the way, let this thing run with the heater blowing. The antifreeze level is pretty much stopped. Say it's right above the line on the jug, but that's alright. A little extra never hurts. So I'm gonna let this sit for a few more minutes and idle, pick up some of this mess I made, and we're gonna go out for a quick cruise. Alright guys, we are hooked up. We're gonna take a little drive down the street. Right now I got it set at about 10 PSI. The exhaust is definitely stinking. Making a little bit of smoke right now. That's to be expected though. Wait for this vehicle to pass. So far, the oil pressure looks great. Coolant hasn't climbed above its normal level. Oh boy, she is smooth. Some get up and go about her now. You can definitely tell the difference from a T-25 to a big 16. 12 pounds or now. You can feel it in the pedal when you hit the gas. It pulls a little quicker. Basically instant response. We ported the O2 housing and we ported the turbine housing, and I'm not getting any boost creep or anything like that yet. I set it to 12, she's sitting right at 12. That's a good thing. So, of course, you guys didn't see it. I did a couple of pulls before I put you guys up here. Whew! Well, all I gotta say is I am absolutely happy that is over. That's a pretty tough job if you're doing it by yourself and you have to do it between work, driving the old lady to and from work. Things get a little tough. But you know what? You stick with it, you'll be able to knock it out, no problem. As long as you prepare and get the parts that you need. Do a light pull real fast. Yeah, that's crazy. It feels great. Oh, that's probably why people stick with these damn cars, huh? Well, I'm gonna cut it right there, guys. Thanks for watching the video. I know it dragged out a little bit here and there. It was definitely a fun build. I had a hell of a time putting it all together. Great swap. So, don't forget to give me a thumbs up down below if you guys like this video. If you want to see the next big thing to come on the channel, subscribe. We're going to put up a couple more videos a lot sooner than we have over the last few weeks. I apologize for that. But